fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360. That's your message if you don't like it?
If you have zero access to the internet, that is an offline device.
Every so often, a product steps onto the stage with the promise of redefining an entire industry. Sometimes it fulfills that promise, and sometimes it becomes a cautionary tale. This is the story of one of the most dramatic moments in gaming history, when Microsoft revealed the Xbox One and in the span of a single presentation, reshaped the fate of its entire brand. But before we get to the fall, we need to understand just how high Xbox had climbed. The rise of Xbox 360. In 2005, Microsoft launched the Xbox 360, a full year before Sony's next system hit shelves. That head start was critical. While Sony struggled with the complex architecture and premium $599 price tag of the PlayStation 3, Microsoft delivered a sleek, developer-friendly machine at a far more accessible price. The PS3 shipped with a Blu-ray drive. Impressive technology at the time, but for many gamers, that feature didn't justify the cost. The Xbox 360, on the other hand, focused on what players actually cared about: great online services, strong developer support, and a growing library of must-play titles. At E3 2005, Microsoft introduced something revolutionary: Gamer Score. For the first time, achievements weren't just hidden milestones, they became a public badge of honor. Your accomplishments followed you across games. They became part of your identity. Years later, competitors would implement similar systems, but Xbox had already defined the standard. And then came the games. By 2010, the numbers told a powerful story. Over 80 million consoles sold, more than 25 million users on Xbox Live, and record-breaking launches like Halo 3, which generated $170 million in its first 24 hours. Xbox wasn't just a console, it was culture. The Red Ring crisis. But success rarely comes without crisis. The infamous Red Ring of Death hardware failure threatened to destroy everything Xbox had built. Consoles overheated, systems failed, social media lit up with frustration. This was a defining moment. Instead of denying the issue, Microsoft made a bold decision: take responsibility. Under the leadership of executives like Peter Moore, the company extended warranties and replaced defective systems, no questions asked. The fix reportedly cost over $1 billion. Financially, it was brutal, but reputationally, it saved the brand. Gamers felt heard. Loyalty deepened. Xbox survived what could have been a fatal blow. And while the public battle raged, something new was already being built behind closed doors. Enter Durango. Inside Microsoft's Redmond campus, engineers were developing the successor to the Xbox 360. The project carried the codename Durango. The man placed in charge, Don Matrick, a former EA executive. And this is where the philosophy began to shift. To many within the gaming community, Xbox had always been about players, multiplayer nights, achievements, blockbuster exclusives. But internally, a new vision was forming, one that aimed beyond games. The next Xbox wouldn't just compete with other consoles, it would dominate the living room. Television integration, voice commands, media apps, cable partnerships, video calls. Gaming would still exist, but it would no longer be the centerpiece. At the same time, complications mounted. Between 2011 and 2013, Microsoft faced serious security breaches. Hackers accessed internal systems, leaked sensitive information, and even managed to obtain development hardware. Dev kits appeared for sale online. The FBI became involved. Durango became a magnet for speculation and leaks. Rather than unveil the console at the industry's biggest stage, E3, Microsoft made an unusual decision. They hosted a standalone reveal event at their own campus. At the time, it puzzled analysts. Why step away from the world's largest gaming spotlight? Some believed the timing was forced by leaks. Others thought Microsoft wanted full control of the narrative. Either way, the decision carried enormous risk. A brand at a crossroads. Inside the Xbox division, tension was building. Engineers questioned certain design priorities. Developers whispered concerns about forcing new hardware features. Longtime fans wondered whether Xbox was still for them. But leadership pushed forward. The belief was simple. The future of entertainment was convergence. One device to control everything. One box under the TV. It sounded ambitious. It sounded modern. It sounded inevitable. But what no one fully realized was how fragile trust could be and how quickly momentum can disappear. On May 21, 2013, Microsoft would step onto the stage to reveal its next console to the world. What was meant to be a celebration would instead become one of the most infamous presentations in gaming history. And that's where the real story begins. On May 21, 2013, the gaming world tuned in with massive expectations. Microsoft was about to unveil the future of Xbox. What they didn't know was that they were about to witness one of the most controversial reveals in gaming history. The reveal that shocked gamers. When Don Mattrick walked onto the stage, confidence filled the room. This was supposed to be a victory lap. Xbox had dominated much of the previous generation. The brand was strong, the audience was ready. But within minutes, something felt off. Instead of opening with groundbreaking games, the presentation focused heavily on television integration, voice commands, switching between live TV and apps, fantasy sports overlays, Skype calls, NFL partnerships. Over and over, the word TV echoed through the broadcast. The new console, officially named the Xbox One, was marketed as an all-in-one entertainment system. The name itself reflected that ambition. One box to control your entire living room. But gamers weren't tuning in to watch cable demos. They wanted games. What they got instead was a tech showcase that felt more like a corporate keynote than a celebration of gaming culture. The three decisions that ignited the backlash. Then came the policies, the real fuel for the fire. First, always online connectivity. The Xbox One would be required to check in with Microsoft's servers every 24 hours. If it failed to do so, certain games would become inaccessible. For players with unstable internet or those in regions with limited connectivity, this wasn't innovation, it was exclusion. Second, mandatory Kinect. The new Kinect sensor would be bundled with every console, increasing the price to $499, $100 more than its main competitor would later announce. Microsoft initially suggested that the console required Kinect to function. To many players, it felt like being forced to pay for hardware they didn't want. And third, perhaps most explosive, was the digital rights management system. Physical discs would no longer behave like traditional discs. Games would be tied to accounts. Lending, trading, or reselling would be heavily restricted. For retailers like GameStop, whose business relied heavily on used games, this was a direct threat. Almost immediately, GameStop's stock dropped sharply. Gamers saw the writing on the wall. Less ownership, more control from the corporation. And the internet responded accordingly. We have a product for you. The backlash intensified when Don Mattrick was asked how the company would handle customers without reliable internet access. His response became legendary. We have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360. In a single sentence, Microsoft appeared to dismiss an entire segment of its audience. Memes exploded across social media, gaming forums erupted, YouTube comment sections turned into battlegrounds. To many fans, it felt like Xbox had stopped listening. And then, as if things couldn't get worse, a Microsoft creative director tweeted dismissively about concerns over always online requirements, telling critics to deal with it. The tweet went viral. Days later, he resigned. The narrative was forming fast, and it wasn't flattering. Meanwhile, Sony was watching. While Microsoft struggled to defend its messaging, executives at Sony were preparing their response. A few weeks later, at E3 2013, Sony stepped onto the stage with a very different tone. They focused almost entirely on games, big titles, gameplay demos, developers speaking directly to players. Then came the moment that flipped the generation. Sony confirmed that the PlayStation 4 would not restrict used games, no mandatory online check-ins, no DRM limitations on physical discs. And then the final blow. $399, $100 cheaper than Xbox One. The audience erupted in applause. Sony didn't just respond to Microsoft, they weaponized Microsoft's mistakes. They even released a short tongue-in-cheek video demonstrating how to share games on PS4. One person hands a disc to another. That's it. The video went viral within minutes. The contrast couldn't be clearer. One company appeared to dictate terms, the other appeared to listen. The damage was immediate. Gaming media outlets quickly declared Sony the winner of E3 before the event had even concluded. Microsoft, meanwhile, doubled down, at least initially. When asked whether they would change their policies after Sony's presentation, company representatives insisted they were confident in their direction. But confidence was quickly turning into crisis. Pre-order momentum shifted. Online sentiment grew increasingly negative. Xbox, once the symbol of modern gaming culture, suddenly looked out of touch. The momentum built during the Xbox 360 era was slipping away, not because of hardware limitations, but because of messaging. And within weeks, Microsoft would be forced to make a dramatic decision, one that would expose just how much damage had already been done. By mid-June 2013, the pressure had become unbearable. Pre-orders were slowing. Social media sentiment was overwhelmingly negative. Gaming press headlines were brutal. What was supposed to be the dawn of a new era had turned into a full-scale PR disaster. Microsoft had a choice: stand firm or reverse course. They chose survival. The Great Reversal. On June 19, 2013, just weeks after defending their policies, Microsoft announced a dramatic change. The always online requirement? Gone. The 24-hour server check-in? Eliminated. Restrictions on used games? Removed. The Xbox One would now function much like a traditional console. Physical discs would work offline. Lending and reselling games would remain intact. On paper, it was exactly what gamers had demanded. But perception is powerful. Instead of relief, many players saw panic. For months, Microsoft executives had described these features as the future of gaming, revolutionary, essential, forward-thinking. Now, at the first sign of serious resistance, they were abandoned. It didn't look like innovation anymore. It looked like corporate backpedaling. Trust, once broken, doesn't instantly repair itself. Leadership fallout. Behind the scenes, accountability was looming. In July 2013, Don Matrick stepped down from his role leading Xbox and moved to Zynga. Officially, it was framed as an exciting new opportunity. Unofficially, many saw it as the end of a turbulent chapter. Matrick had championed the entertainment-first strategy. He had defended the policies that ignited backlash, and under his leadership, Xbox had suffered one of the most damaging brand hits in gaming history. But the problems didn't disappear with his departure. The reveal had already shaped public perception, and first impressions are stubborn. Launch day with baggage. On November 22, 2013, the Xbox One officially launched. Technically, it was a powerful machine, solid architecture, strong online infrastructure, a handful of promising launch titles. But it carried baggage. The Kinect sensor was still bundled in the box, keeping the price at $499, even as the PS4 launched at $399 without any mandatory peripherals. To many consumers, the choice seemed simple. Within 24 hours of launch, Sony reported over 1 million PS4 units sold. Momentum was clearly on their side. Meanwhile, Xbox felt like it was trying to explain itself. It's not always online. You can trade used games. You don't have to use Kinect. The messaging had become defensive rather than aspirational. And in marketing, defense rarely wins generations. a narrative that wouldn't die. Even after policy reversals, many players still believed the Xbox One required constant internet. Others remained suspicious of Kinect's always listening microphone and camera. The memes had already cemented the image. In the digital age, once a narrative takes hold, it spreads faster than corrections ever can. Microsoft launched aggressive advertising campaigns. Executives gave interviews clarifying policies. Blog posts attempted to reset the conversation. But the damage was deeper than technical specifications. It was emotional. Gamers who once felt understood by Xbox now felt sidelined. The Xbox 360 had been about community, competition, identity. The Xbox One reveal felt corporate, disconnected, transactional. And that contrast lingered. A new CEO, a new direction. In February 2014, leadership shifted at the very top of Microsoft. Satya Nadella became CEO, replacing Steve Ballmer. Nadella's mission was clear: modernize Microsoft, pivot towards cloud services, and rebuild long-term relevance. But he inherited an Xbox division in crisis. The console was trailing badly in sales. The brand image was damaged. Internally, some questioned whether gaming even fit Microsoft's future. There were real discussions about spinning off or selling the Xbox division entirely. It was that serious. Then came a pivotal decision. In March 2014, Nadella appointed Phil Spencer to lead Xbox. He wasn't a traditional corporate executive. He was a gamer. He had worked inside Microsoft's gaming division for decades, and, perhaps most importantly, he understood the culture that Xbox once represented. His mandate wasn't flashy. It was simple: rebuild trust. The slow climb back. One of Spencer's first major moves was to unbundle Kinect, finally dropping the console price to match PlayStation. It was another admission that the earlier strategy had failed, but it was necessary. Then came an unexpected announcement: backward compatibility for Xbox 360 games. Ironically, this directly contradicted a previous comment from Matrick suggesting that backward compatibility was a sign of being backwards. Gamers loved it. Developers were given more stage time at events. The messaging shifted back towards games rather than television partnerships. Xbox wasn't trying to dominate your cable box anymore. It was trying to earn its place back in your living room, the old-fashioned way. But while trust slowly began to rebuild, one harsh reality remained. Generations are hard to win back once lost, and the numbers were telling a difficult story. By the time the dust settled, the numbers told a sobering story. Over its lifetime, the Xbox One would sell an estimated 50 to 60 million units worldwide. Respectable by most standards, but in comparison, the PlayStation 4 surged past 117 million units. That's not a close race. That's a generational shift. The worst generation to lose. Later, Phil Spencer would openly admit something profound. The Xbox One era was the worst generation to lose. In earlier console cycles, switching platforms was relatively easy. Your old cartridges or discs didn't carry forward. Every generation felt like a reset button. But the Xbox One and PS4 era marked the rise of fully digital libraries. Gamers weren't just buying discs anymore, they were building ecosystems. Hundreds of digital purchases, downloadable content, subscription histories, achievements, friends lists, entire identities tied to one platform. Once players invested thousands of dollars into one ecosystem, they were unlikely to leave. Losing that generation didn't just mean losing hardware sales, it meant losing long-term loyalty. And that kind of loss compounds. A strategic pivot. Under Spencer's leadership and with backing from Satya Nadella, Xbox began shifting away from the traditional console war mindset. Instead of fighting solely for hardware dominance, Microsoft leaned into services. In 2017, they introduced Xbox Game Pass, a subscription model offering a growing library of games for a monthly fee. At first, many questioned whether it was sustainable, but over time, it became the centerpiece of Xbox's strategy. Microsoft started acquiring studios in an aggressive pace, Bethesda's parent company ZeniMax Media, and eventually the massive acquisition of Activision Blizzard King, one of the largest deals in gaming history. The message was clear: if you can't win purely on hardware, win on content and accessibility. The next generation with Ghosts. In 2020, Microsoft launched the Xbox Series X and Xbox Series S, powerful, well-designed consoles with strong performance and consumer-friendly messaging. This time, there were no DRM controversies, no forced peripherals, no mandatory online check-ins. On paper, they got it right. But the ghosts of 2013 lingered. Sony's PlayStation 5 maintained strong momentum. Many players who had committed to the PlayStation ecosystem during the previous generation simply stayed there. Digital libraries are sticky, habits are sticky, brand narratives are sticky. Even with strong hardware and bold acquisitions, Xbox was no longer leading the race, it was redefining the race. From console to platform. Gradually, Microsoft's messaging evolved into something different. This is an Xbox. The phrase stopped referring to a single plastic box under a TV. It began to represent an ecosystem: cloud gaming, PC integration, smart TVs, tablets, streaming devices. Xbox wasn't just selling consoles anymore, it was selling access. Xbox Game Pass on your console, on your PC, on your phone through cloud streaming, anywhere with a screen and internet connection. Ironically, many of the ideas that were rejected in 2013, digital ownership, streaming, persistent connectivity, eventually became normalized across the industry. But timing is everything. In 2013, those ideas felt forced. Today, they feel inevitable. The lesson of May 21st. The Xbox One reveal wasn't just a bad presentation, it was a turning point. On May 21, 2013, Microsoft didn't lose because of weak hardware. They didn't lose because of a lack of engineering talent. They lost because they misread their audience. They shifted the spotlight away from what gamers loved, community, creativity, ownership, and towards what executives believed the future should look like. And in doing so, they fractured trust. Rebuilding that trust has taken over a decade. The Xbox brand still exists, it still innovates, it still competes, but the dream of outright winning the console war effectively ended that day. Not because Xbox lacked ambition, not because they lacked resources, but because in a single moment, live at 10 a.m. Pacific, they forgot who they were building for. And in gaming, your community isn't just your customer base, it's your foundation.